Là, c'est bon ou pas?
Ouais, c'est comme les relations internationales, c'est-à-dire faut qu'on, à un moment,
Ouais.
mettre les moyens au service de nos ambitions. Attends,
C'est bon, vous m'entendez, alors il n'y a pas de problème. Ok, non, c'est moi qui n'avais pas branché le micro, c'est normal.
ça marche mieux pour toi, dis-moi.
Ouais.
C'est toujours comme ça.
Ok, bah moi je vais rester pendant le temps, jusqu'à la pause, pour voir si tout se passe bien.
Ah, tu
Et
m'étonnes.
sinon, vous l'avez bien en stéréo?
Je suis pas mécontent de m'être abstrait de toute la dimension administrative de la musique
Ouais, ouais, je me
pour
suis mis comme
quelques
tu m'as
temps là.
dit. Ouais, ouais.
C'est toujours mieux d'arriver après un an et demi, 2 ans de nouvelles de formation.
Ouais, quand les choses sont un peu rodées. Là.
Normalement,
D'accord, ok.
on m'a dit,
Très bien.
c'est fait pour le cinéma.
Ok, bah moi je vais aller.
En fait,
Je vais
j'avais
brancher
contacté.
Oui, mais il est
je vais
dirigé
me mettre
Ouais.
pour droit.
pour regarder pour voir
Ouais.
si
C'est
ça
très
se passe bien.
spécifique. Normalement, je fais. S'il te manque des choses, il ne doit pas te manquer grand-chose.
Non, non, ça a marché en fait. Moi, ce qui s'est passé, c'est qu'il y avait.
On se rappelle.
J'arrivais pas à faire les modifications.
D'accord.
Donc j'ai appelé. Comment il s'appelle, je sais plus. Damien, voilà, qui a été super. Effectivement, il faut appeler les gens parce que si tu. Et donc, bah voilà, apparemment, un glitch dont ils ignoraient, mais tellement exceptionnel qu'ils n'ont même pas cherché la solution. Et puis à un moment, ça s'est débloqué.
Bon, ben voilà.
Ouais, en théorie, ça,
Bon,
il reçoit bien.
c'est facile.
Ouais, faudrait que ça marche aussi jeudi prochain.
Jeudi prochain, moi, à 16h30, je serai à TikTok pour les
Ouais,
séances.
c'est ça.
Et puis après, c'est moi, je rajoute après Marie, puis après, c'est un ennui avec les collègues.
Ouais, ce serait beau.
Ah, ça c'est sûr. Bon, ben voilà.
Bien.
Déjà, j'ai demandé aux gens de passer dans la revue.
Ouais. De toute façon, moi je vais me mettre.
Donc le portable, je te laisse avec la sacoche.
Ouais.
Pour le reste, voilà. Bon, ben voilà. Je vais caler 16h30 de prochain. Donc tu sais qu'à partir de quelle heure tu dis
Bah, ce sera juste après le pause. De toute façon, vous finissez à quelle heure déjà vous?
45
Ouais, 16h45.
Non, 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 15h45.
Ah oui, tu m'as fait peur. Un quart d'heure pour tout mettre en place, ça serait avant.
Ah oui, oui, oui,
Non,
15h45.
c'est un cours de 2 heures.
Ok, bon, bah si on dit 16h15, 16h35, tu vois, là on est.
Ouais, de toute façon, je ferai comme j'ai fait tout à l'heure. J'installerai tout le matériel déjà.
Bon, bon après-midi, messieurs.
Ouais.
Salut, à bientôt.
Voilà, on a un grand rond là.
Ouais, on va attendre 2 minutes.
Parce qu'en plus, dans cette antenne, on a un gros problème de son. C'est quand les profs ils bougent, bah, du coup, à la Roche ils n'entendent plus rien.
Ouais, ouais, ça
Donc,
c'est la visio. Ouais.
ouais, là, pour faire installer un tripode, un petit micro qu'on a là sur les portables, sur les mobiles.
Ouais.
Comme ça, le prof peut bouger et tout. Tu viens voir pour un micro-cravate.
Ouais, essayer. Ouais, micro-cravate aussi. Ou je peux le prendre dans la main hein, si je bouge aussi.
Bah celui-là, non, peut-être pas. Là, pour aujourd'hui,
Ouais,
pour toi.
d'accord. Non, mais je suis assez statique de toute
Ouais,
façon.
c'est monsieur. Comment il s'appelle déjà? Bigot.
Ouais.
Il bouge pas mal
Il
après.
bouge, ouais.
D'accord. De toute façon, ce que je vais faire, c'est je vais rapprocher après les deux micros de telle sorte à ce que le micro de chair et le micro caméra soient l'un à côté de l'autre. Là, c'est bon, tu m'as bien entendu? Plus j'évite de parler trop fort. Ah bah dis donc, ouais, je me suis entendu là. Ah, ça. Ok, ok. Donc, bah voilà. Je pense que le cours va bientôt commencer. Parce que là, ah, ouais. Parce que là j'ai l'impression qu'on a personne alors. Donc en streaming, on entend bien. Bien clair. Donc, par contre, il n'y a personne à...
Ça m'inquiète pas. S'il n'y a personne, ça ne veut pas dire qu'on aura plus besoin de faire ça la prochaine fois. Le taux d'absentéisme grimpe en flèche très rapidement.
Ouais, bah, surtout si... Ouais. Vous avez personne à La Roche? Il n'y a personne à La Roche?
Très bien.
Bon, on verra bien. Alors là. Je laisserai le matériel, puis dès que ce sera fini, je viendrai.
Ouais, absolument. Vous pouvez y aller maintenant, vous n'êtes pas obligé de rester, je pense.
Bah, c'est surtout si ça bug, c'est pour
Ah oui,
éviter
d'accord.
que je rentre, sorte et tout. Après,
Ok.
une fois que la première heure est passée, on coupe le streaming. Et puis...
Mais ceci dit, s'il n'y a personne, après, il n'y a personne en plus. Donc,
Bah, nous, c'est surtout pour le streaming.
ouais, d'accord. Ouais, c'est une expérimentation.
Ouais, ouais, bah ouais, parce que jeudi prochain, on a une conférence avec la Caisse d'épargne, justement, pour, avec l'IAE.
D'accord. Il faut que ça marche avec la banque.
Voilà, parce qu'on est dessus depuis juin. Vous voulez que je mette le...
Ouais, s'il vous plaît. C'est bon. Ah oui, ben non, je peux pas. Ok, ouais, c'est bon. On est bon. Et donc, il faut que je parle dans les deux micros, c'est ça?
Ça, on va mettre ça comme ça. Et, voilà. l'info là. On va pas faire que ça. J'ai l'impression que on pense que c'est chez nous qu'il y a des problèmes, mais je me pose la question de savoir si c'est pas chez eux.
Ok, vous me dites quand qu'on attend un peu là.
Ouais, c'est que ça a pas l'air de fonctionner, quoi.
Faut que je rebascule sur mon PowerPoint de toute façon pour commencer.
Ouais. Désolé, du coup,
Non, non, je t'en prie.
tout était prêt et plus rien ne fonctionne. Oui, il y a un problème là. Parce que moi j'essaie de vous appeler, là, je n'arrive plus à réceptionner. Ah, ça y est. Ouais. D'accord. Ok, bah, je relance. Continue. Voilà.
Okay, sorry for the delay. It takes time to get the connection right so that nobody can listen to us. You know? I don't know if there's anybody in La Roche anyway, who cares? Technology, you know, the whole thing, it does transform us. It does transform human beings individually, and it transforms mankind as a whole. I saw that they issued the new iPhone 10, and you get more media coverage on this shit than, you know, on malaria in Africa, and on the fact that, you know, this is okay, sorry, mate. Oh, this is the thing with finger pointing. I like to pick on the same guy twice the same day. Here again, nothing personal. Just get rid of this. Get rid of this shit. Well, you don't need that. This is modern slavery. Okay. So before I forget, I posted some homework to do for next week. All right. So you go on Madoc, and this is the only time you will have something to do in advance. You know, I know it's a lecture. You're not expected to do anything before a lecture, but you know, next time we'll start to work on the definition of law. What can we define this concept? Okay. So what am I supposed to do with that? Qu'est-ce que je dois faire là? Hein? S'il n'y a pas d'étudiants à La Roche, on peut lâcher l'affaire. Hein. Okay. The whole thing, you know, with technology, it's supposed to help you. And from the beginning, you know, the stick helps you to fight against the lion, and then this IT is supposed to, you know, help you to get some quality time and remove some boring tasks. But this is not the way it works. I mean, the way it works is that most of your time now is devoted to screens. It's actually very interesting. People 50 years ago, they didn't spend a minute in front of a screen. And now you spend, on average, I don't know, 6, if you include iPhone, 6 to 7 hours a day in front of screens. You know? You're going to turn, I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that it's fascinating. There is no pilot in the plane. We are experiencing a global transformation of human culture. And it's centered around technology, not about content, but about, medium. And well, it's going to be interesting. You'll see more of that than I do, but we are collectively changing. You're the first generation of digital native, I see. So are you, I don't know. Old people, when they speak about the young people, the younger people, they always think that, okay, they're different. Are you really different? I don't know. Your relationship to technology. You're closer to laptops than trees, for sure. And okay, I'm trying to, make something of this time, but he left. So how do I get back to the... Okay, Madoc. All right. So today we're going to finish this lecture on English hegemony, and then I'll try to define what legal philosophy is about. And after that, the next step is to define law. The problem with the definition of law is that there is not one single definition. There are many. And what can be interesting is for you to try to reflect on your own definition of law. And to do that, I've got a few exercises. So you go on Madoc. You just Oh no. Oh yes, because it's my. You shouldn't see all that, right? Hopefully you don't have all that on Madoc. What I want you to check is, you go there, section 2, homework. Oh putain. Yeah, exactly. Well, this is university. What does it mean? It means that you can say, no, I won't do that. And you don't do that. There are plenty of stuff to do. Don't do everything. What would be nice is that I can interact with at least a few of you on each of these questions. So maybe on the right side you work on the, and there is even more. Oh, okay. So maybe on the right side you deal with the first questions. In the middle you deal with the questions in the middle, and on the left side you deal with the last questions. Okay, is that all right? What are the first questions? What are the last? You're grown up now. You should be able to see the difference between the beginning and the end. All right. And if you're serious and committed students, you do the whole thing. Okay. But obviously, I'm not going to assess you. I'm not going to evaluate you. And if nobody can say anything about anything, then it's going to be just the usual lecture. It's just something I want to try. Can I interact? Can we interact in such a big room? Maybe we can't. But if you don't do the job in advance, for sure, nothing will happen. Okay? So you just. It starts with. It starts with a short text, the pervasiveness of norms. It's 4 pages to read, and then a couple of questions, all right? And you don't have to have a lot to say for the discussion to start. But if you have nothing to say, then nothing happens, okay? Okay. Do you have any questions? Did you go to Madoc? I hope this is my... I hope I've got more information than you have, because I don't want you to have access to all the PowerPoint immediately at the beginning of the year. Okay, we were talking about the linguistic hegemony of English language. Do you have any questions or comments on that? Or somebody wants to summarize what has been said? What has been said? No? How many students were not here last week? Raise your hand so that I can... Okay, so most of you were here last week. So this first session was about the reason I teach this class in English. There are very instrumental reasons. We are living in a European environment where student exchanges are getting more and more important, and if we want to have Erasmus students from other countries to come to Nantes, then it's very important that we have at least a few courses taught in English in the curriculum. But this is not the only reason. You know, this is an important reason, and this is probably the main reason why this course has been set up. If we don't have courses taught in English, then no Erasmus students from other places will come to Nantes. And because we want to send our students to other places, then we have to offer courses that will be attractive to foreign students. So this is like the very instrumental reason, but this is not the purpose of the class. The purpose of the class is to reflect on the reason why English has become so prominent in our world. And I explained that, of course, it's very important to speak English because it's the language of, it's a very useful language. But there are also problems with this pervasiveness of English, like political problem. There is this kind of cultural hegemony of the English language, which should matter to us. Why does it matter? Why does it matter? This is where I stopped last time, I think. It matters because it creates linguistic and communicative inequality between the people who can and the people who can't master English. It creates linguistic discrimination and social inequality, here again, between the people who are able to interact in English and those who can't. And it creates this very strange phenomenon, which could be called colonization of consciousness. I'm going to spend some time on these three aspects. So let's start with linguistic and communicative inequality. What do I mean by that? Well, to make a long story short, it means that in a situation where English dominates communication, the non-English speaking people are disadvantaged. They are inevitably disadvantaged. They become mute and deaf in all arenas where English is a language. And they are therefore prevented from fully participating in communication. This is what we call the structure of linguistic and communicative inequality. It exists in many settings. It exists in large transnational corporations, and it also exists in the academic world. It exists in all English-dominated international communication. And we'll look at an example from international conferences. You will have academic international conferences, but also political international conferences. And there is a Japanese anthropologist called Takahashi, and he has written a book about that. After having observed many international conferences where English is the only one official language. And you know, as an anthropologist, you look at things, but from a critical perspective. You're not part of the game. You look at the game which is played, but you're not part of the game. And so he attended many academic conferences, and he watched what was happening. Not really much about the content, but the way people were interacting. And what he saw is that where English is the only one official language, well, native speakers of English take full advantage of the linguistic and communicative inequality for their own benefits. When you have these big international conferences where people are English native speakers, where other people come from other parts of the world and they speak a bit of English, and where people don't speak English at all, well, the people who can't speak English, they don't have their say, and the people who speak a little bit of English but not very well, they are completely disadvantaged when it comes to asserting position and making statement and trying to negotiate what has to be negotiated, right? And this is what Takahashi reports, and it's a quote. there is a great gap in the working knowledge of English between native speakers and non-native speakers, especially those speakers whose mother tongues are linguistically distant from English. Thus, native speakers of English intentionally try to push non-native speakers out of discussions by making a full use of tactics that stems from phonetic, idiomatic, syntactic, and pragmatic characteristics unique only in English. For example, they step up the speed of speech, they use a large number of jargons and idioms, or they make utterances that are grammatically complex. These communicative tactics are used to advantage a lower proficiency of non-native speakers in English. This is the way it works. Well, you don't have to go in international conference to understand that mastering language is a very, very powerful tool to impose your authority. Even in a French setting, if you have great ability to discuss, to argue, and you can use complicated words, then it's going to be easy for you to impose your point of view. Whereas if you don't have many words in your vocabulary, you're going to be pushed back. You're not going to be you're not going to have the opportunity to clarify your thought. And to a large extent, this is what the law is about. You know, the law is not very much. It's not a science. It's an art. It's an oral. Which is partly oral. And a good lawyer is somebody who can speak. I mean, I don't know if you saw this crappy movie called Lawyer with what's his name? Yeah, Jim Carrey. Thank you. Well, it's a crappy movie, and in the U.S. there is something about the image of the lawyer, but it has to do with ability to speak and to bullshit. Bullshitting is part of the legal process. And the thing is, because English is in international setting is the language, then it's going to be very important to be able to bullshit in English if you want to make sure that you can make your point, okay? And those who can't, even if they have more interesting things to say, they will not be heard. This is what is happening all the time. And as Takahashi observed, it seems that native speakers of English in the English-dominated conferences use their linguistic advantage to magnify their power. It's not because they speak English. It's because they are human. Any individual in a setting will try to magnify his power. And, well, because they can do that through the use of English, they will do it. I'm not saying that these people are worse than the others, those who cannot speak English. I'm just saying that there is a complex setting of incentives and opportunities that allow them to magnify their power because they can speak English and the others can't, okay? And of course you want to be on the side of the people that can magnify their power. It's better to have some power than to have no power at all, okay? Of course, it's a very simplistic explanation, and there are many other elements that explain why somebody has any sort of symbolic power and why somebody wouldn't have any power. But the linguistic dimension is one of the characteristics that will contribute to this power, okay? And so, this is one of the reasons why this linguistic domination of English matters. It matters because it creates this sort of inequality. And if you believe in inequality, then it matters. And if you don't care about equality, but you don't speak English, then it matters too, because you're not going to be you're not going to be in the right place. It would have been better for you to live 1 century ago when French was the language of power, okay? So either it matters because it's unfair, or it matters because fair or unfair, it's going to be a problem if you can't speak it, okay? Now, there is another reason why this, yes? you're right. No, thank you. That's that. You made a. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you very well because there were these three blokes at the front who were talking at the same time. So, but they won't do it again. Okay, okay. No, so no. Well, I mean, you made a very good point, and a psychological answer would be that I'm resentful because I'm French, and French was this international lingua franca 1 century ago, and it's not. So no, but this is not the reason why I'm resentful. I'm resentful because, well, I will explain that more later on. But because also this domination comes with a cultural framework. It's not only about the language. It's also about all the cultural landscape which comes with the language. But I'm not saying that another language would be better. What would be better is that all of us, if all of us could speak 5, 6 languages, that would create more equality, and that would be more fun. Yeah, you're right. And that's something you are faced with when you start to study political philosophy. You want to reduce power, and you want to reduce the possibility that people makes the most of their advantages. But actually it's very difficult because power is everywhere. How do you civilize power? I don't know. And how do you civilize linguistic power? I don't know. One way to do it is at least to be conscious about it. So, you know, this is what French intellectuals do. They criticize. They do not offer any alternative. Where are you from? Germany, yeah. Okay. How many languages do you speak?
3 and Latin.
Okay. Well, Latin was the lingua franca.
Well,
Yeah. No, I mean, actually, technically, it's not going to happen. But one solution would be to impose as a lingua franca a language in which there is no native speaker. That was the idea of Esperanto. You know, let's create a new language that no one is good at, so that we're all equal.
That would mean equality, but that would make communication, you know, it would make it harder. But communication is lingua franca, makes communication easier. So it's not. It might create equality, but it wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't benefit the object of communication.
Yeah, you're right. We could discuss that. And we could dig that. We could go deeper and ask ourselves this. Anyway, even if you master the language, communication is just a dream. You think you communicate, but I mean, we don't even know ourselves. So what do you expect from, you know, true communication? Doesn't exist. But no, I see your point, and thank you. It was, I mean, very thoughtful. Let me plug that. Anyway, I'll try to convince you because I've got a couple of other arguments against English linguistic hegemony. Kind of related to the previous point is the question of linguistic discrimination and social inequality. The dominance of English creates the prejudices and stereotypes, which in turn creates discrimination against those who do not or cannot speak English. For example, those who cannot speak English fluently are labeled as, well, maybe not incompetent, but less qualified, and thus, in a way, they will be perceived as being inferior. This is how you perpetuate class discrimination, through this kind of social signs. You can speak English or you can't. And depending on what you can or can't do, you'll be seen, although we are all equals in rights, this is part of it's the heritage of the Enlightenment. Of course, in reality, we are not. And so English linguistic ability will be part of the social signs that allow for social discrimination. And in other words, English, because of its dominant prestigious status, functions as a basis of discrimination and therefore legitimates and reproduces the perceptions of linguistic prejudice and discrimination. Now let me give you an example. In France, if your father is Portuguese and your mother is from Algeria, and you learn French at school and you learn Spanish, you speak 4 languages very well. But as long as you can't speak English, it doesn't count. You know, if you can speak Arabic very well and Portuguese very well, well, that's fine, mate, but you're still part of the lower class. You're still part of the lower stratum, okay? And maybe you've got much more merit to be able to write and speak Arabic. But, you know, what you need is to speak the language of the powerful, and it's English. So there is this discrimination which will remain, although you've got much more linguistic competencies that, you know, the bloke who can only speak a bit of English. If you can't, but you master 4 other languages, it's not going to be very useful. I mean, as an individual, it can be extremely useful. But as a social actor, this will not make the difference. Of course, there would be exception to that. But generally speaking, you've got English will serve as a factor of discrimination. And it is not directly related to linguistic merit. Okay? Discriminatory perceptions and attitudes towards non-English speakers justify the social hierarchy which places native speakers of English at the top of the order, with non-native speakers of English placed in the middle, and the people who do not speak English at all placed at the bottom. Okay, I do simplify things when I say that, when I describe society this way. It's, you know, this class stratification is super complex, and there are many, many factors. But you know, mastering English is definitely one of these factors. The dominance of English is such that it serves as a criterion by which to classify people according to their proficiency. Of course, it's not the only criterion, but it is an important one, and this is true both in emerging countries as in the Western world. I've spent 4 months in India last year, and believe me, you know, there is a clear distinction between Indian people who can speak English and those who cannot, And it has been part of the whole colonization process. Let's create a tiny elite of Indian people able to master English, and let's educate them in England, and let's send them back to their country, and they will recreate our own social hierarchy. Here again, I'm not saying that it has to do with the English people and the English language. We did that, and probably worse, the French, last century. But I'm just talking about contemporary structure of domination. So this is the world we live in today. All right? This dominance of English is such that the stereotypes and prejudices are easily created to hold a discriminatory perception and attitude towards those who do not and cannot speak English. And so English functions as a basis for of discrimination. And native speakers of English reign as a prestigious ruling class of international communication. They can easily express their ideas anytime, while non-native speakers and people who do not speak English constitute the muted working class of international communication. I'm using some sort of Marxist terminology here. I'm not a Marxist, okay? I mean, this is the point. You are first-year students, except for the Erasmus student. I'm giving you I emphasize the radical dimension of the speech. I mean, you don't have to take for granted what I'm saying, but you know, this is a way of seeing things. And of course, if you speak English very well, you would probably think that, come on, I'm overdoing it. This is not that bad. But, well, if you don't speak English, then you realize that, yes, it is that bad because you're stuck. Okay, then you could say, well, fuck that. I mean, you just learn English and get over it, mate. And I guess this is a reasonable way to see things, except that here again, do you have the education system and the cultural resources to learn English? This is where there is the equality problem. Anyway, any comments on this dimension? All right. Last but not least, colonization of the consciousness. And I'm drawing upon post-colonial studies here. This is the third and ultimate consequence of the dominance of English. It is what is usually called colonization of the consciousness. And it refers to the mental control of the colonized by the colonizer. Okay, mental control. This is a big word, mental control. And you may even think there is some sort of plot, some conspiracy there. No, no conspiracy. It doesn't work this way. But mental control can be much more subtle. Now, colonization of the mind occurs as a result of the domination of the colonizer's language over the language of the colonized. If you were not here last week, we talked a little bit about linguistic relativity, and I mentioned Wittgenstein and the idea that our mind and our thought are shaped, deeply shaped by our concepts, which are themselves part of one specific language. Concepts, we may think they are universal, but they are actually embedded in language. And so by imposing your language, you also impose your concepts. And there is a lot of writing on that in post-colonial studies, and African writers wrote about this very well. And there is this bloke, Ngugi Chiongo, who wrote a book entitled Decolonizing the Mind, and he describes how colonialism takes control of the mind of the colonized as follows, and I quote, "Colonialism's most important area of domination was the mental universe of the colonized and the control through culture of how people perceive themselves and their relationship to the world." So for colonialism, this involved two aspects of the same process. There is, on the one hand, the destruction of or the deliberate undervaluing of a people's culture, art, dances, religion, history, geography, education, literature. The locals, they've got a culture, but we don't take it seriously. And so we will undervalue it. And then, on the other hand, there is the domination of a people's language by the languages of the colonizing nation. And this was crucial to the domination of the mental universe of the colonized. Colonization is about going to some place and say, what you're doing, well, it's okay, but it's not that good. And what we are doing, it's great, so you should adopt the way we do it. And it works with language. It works with language. And it worked so well that, part of the colonization process in the 19th century relied on this linguistic domination and it led to mental control. I mentioned the case of the Indian case, the colonization of India by the Brits. They used language as a very powerful tool. And when you go to India now, they've got so many languages that when they communicate, when people from Mumbai communicate with people from Delhi, they do it not in Hindi, which is the official language of India, but they do it in English. Okay? And that implies that the global dominance of English today is to lead to the control of the mind of the global population by the speakers of English and their nations and government. well, note that this demonstration works with developing countries and the 19th century colonization process. But you can also apply it to cultural hegemony today. The way the common of English language create social inequality between us, and the way Anglo-American culture is colonizing the French imaginary. And here again, I don't want to sound resentful. I'm just full of American culture. I listen, actually more English than American, but I don't watch, and I don't watch many French movies. I don't listen to many French songs, and yeah, I'm full of American culture. But this is happening now, and 30 years ago things were not as bad as that. And just think about this course. Giving a course in English in a French law faculty, that would have been unbelievable 30 years ago. All these first-year students attending a course in English, no way, no way. We've got something to defend. We've got the French culture to defend. And but today, all my colleagues agreed that I should teach this course in English. And French universities are under a lot of constraints. There are budget cuts. We are reducing the number of courses, yet we are creating new ones in English. And the craziest thing is that my colleagues are so desperate that although they are kind of very conservative, they are ready to give me the green light to do anything. I can teach you about Native American law as long as I do it in English. This is where we are. I mean, and it's a state of despair. I don't know about Germany at the moment. I'm trying to apply for a fellowship in Germany, and I read this report which has been published by the German Council on Social Science 5 years ago. And there was the same thing, basically saying German law faculties should open up to international debate in English if possible. And are there any courses in English in German law faculties? Yes? But I guess it's pretty recent.
Well, for example, if you have international private law, that's the language of international private law. So
Oh, it should be French. It was French 40 years ago.
it was.
Yeah.
I mean, 120 years ago, the language of chemistry was German, but we're still
Yeah.
fine with speaking in English now.
Yeah. But you're still very good at chemistry. I studied drug policy, and I know about that for sure. Okay. All right. Where am I? Well, anyway, now here in this law faculty, if you want to maximize your professional opportunities, you must improve your English. And doing so, you will create inequality between you and the other students. You are 800 in the first year, and only 200 will work on their English. And the others, well, they won't. And yet everybody knows that it can make a difference. And well, if on top of that you can speak Spanish, Arabic, or Chinese, it's even better, but it's not that important. English is the key at this point of history. And the worst thing, but now we are entering the realm of psychology, and I'm not a specialist of that, but the worst thing is that if eventually you master that language very well, then you will consider yourself maybe not as a better person, maybe not as a better person, but you will tend to look down upon the others who don't speak English, thus reinforcing social inequality. You can do it, they can't, so, well, you deserve a bit more, all right? And of course you should not do that, because doing that you will be nothing but the tool of American imperialism. And remember that you have much more intellectual merit if you can master Arabic or Chinese. But no, English will make you feel more important. And the truth is that English is now the language of power, and if you master the language of power, you will use this power. Now, why is English the language of power? Why it is hegemonic? You have to relate that to the globalization process, which started 30 years ago. English is the language of globalization. I mean, you could say that globalization started much more long ago. It started 2,000 years ago in a way. But this technological and political globalization we are going through at the moment, it started 30 years ago. And English is the language at the core, at the center of this process. It operates as a means of promoting globalization, and the dominance of English serves to facilitate globalization. And well, you said it, it's a lingua franca. We need a lingua franca, we need a linguistic medium to interact in this global village, and it's English. And the dominance of English serves to facilitate globalization, but what is interesting is that globalization in turn assumes and encourages the use and dominance of English. In other words, the dominance of English is a reflection of the structure of global relations, and there is a reinforcement process. English helps globalization, and globalization promotes English. It is not a process which has been carefully planned. There is no conspiracy there. It's a social phenomenon. And it's a reflection of the structure of the unequal global relations in which a few center nations dominate over the periphery nations. And at the moment, and it may change, but at the moment, the central nation, it's the US. Maybe it's not anymore. There is always some time between the main central power lose its power and the effects vanish. But at this point, at least, we still see the US as the central, as the core of this global village. Maybe it's not the US, maybe it's only California, but it's happening there. And the rest of the world is the periphery. One of the most serious problems caused by globalization is Anglo-Americanization of the world culture, based on the Anglo-American monopoly of the global market of information and entertainment. Well, we could qualify that. You've got Al Jazeera, you've got a variety of other medium. And China, I don't know about China, but I suspect that they have very strong media structure in Chinese. Still, Al Jazeera, they do have a channel in English, and Russian Today, I think, Russia Today, a crazy news channel. It's in English, and I'm not going to insist on that, but I suspect that most of you mainly listen to English songs and watch American movies, and nothing else. This would be the problem. The problem is not to watch American movies and listen to English songs. The problem is that there is nothing else. There is nothing else, and so the result is a global impoverishment, cultural impoverishment. And this inevitably results in the ideological control of the world population. Here again, nobody controls that. There is nobody in charge of controlling the ideology of the world, but there is a global ideology which is shared over the world. And American ways of feeling and thinking become very visible and therefore influential as American cultural and information products are received and welcomed by the whole population of the world. Here again, we could discuss that. And there is a very famous theorist, Samuel Huntington. Have you heard of Samuel Huntington? Raise your hand if you heard about him. Yeah, okay. Samuel Huntington, he wrote The Clash of Civilization. It was, 20 years ago. And a fascinating book with strong performative effects. He said, it's not because they eat hamburger in India that they do believe in the US Constitution. Actually, we do think that we are living in a global village, but we have religion which are extremely important, and we have civilizations that will fight each other in the future. I don't believe in this thesis, but it has been extremely influential. It has been read by the Bush family and by all the neoconservatives. And they believed in that, and you may believe in that. But you can also think that this is, something which is very shallow, and the reality is that even if you live in Syria today, or in Iraq, or in Saudi Arabia, what do? Well, I'm afraid you watch American porn movies. I mean, this is sad, but this is the reality of cultural globalization. And you have these religious kind of tension and cultural tensions between vast regions of the world. But one interpretation is that it's just because there is a slow process of adaptation to this global culture. I can't give you I don't know what's going on. There is some uncertainty about the process. But one interpretation is that it's very much about taking time to create this global culture, which is essentially an American culture. And Anglo-Americanization and globalization go hand in hand in enabling the US to be in a position to be able to control, influence, and dominate over other countries in terms of values, beliefs, and thoughts. But here, and I want to emphasize that there is no conspiracy. It's not Donald Trump who is in charge. Donald Trump is in charge of nothing. He doesn't understand what's happening. It's a big global phenomenon, big social phenomenon, okay? The rest of the world is simply bombarded with the images, ideas, and values that are American. And eventually they will absorb these values and they will become their values. And they are already all values. I mean, when law students go to court, they are always surprised that here we call the judge Monsieur le Juge and not Votre Honneur. Votre Honneur, that's only in the American series. But it's only until you reach 25 years old and you've studied law for 5 years until you realize that this is not the way we do it in France. And it's a nice example applied to law, how we are just shaped by the American culture. Now the question is it bad? Well, it sounds like it's bad the way I described it. But maybe not. Is it bad? This is a question I ask you. Is it bad? Maybe not. American movies are great, and well, yes, it's bad, and we are doomed. Yes and no. It's bad because the dominance of English is evidently serving Western capitalist civilization, and we're not talking about American culture anymore here. It's a big business, this capitalist civilization is not sustainable as it goes today. We all know that, and the Paris Agreement will not be enough. So we are going to hit the wall for ecological reason, and you may think it has nothing to do with linguistic hegemony, but everything is linked to everything, and because this linguistic hegemony is the direct consequences and one of the powerful driver of economic globalization, then you can think that it's bad. We'd better stay in our little communities and grow crops and not buy all these technology, and that would be the best way to make sure that will sustain the whole social machinery. But of course, it's too late. The toothpaste went out of the tube, so it's too late. So, Another reason why it's bad is that we could dream of a world where there is equality in communication. That's what we mentioned half an hour ago, where languages and cultures are equal, where multilingualism is the rule, and we can think of multiculturalism without fear. But who cares? What we should not forget as French speakers is that we are now experiencing with English what we have imposed on the rest of the world for centuries. French has been the dominant language for a long time, and we did not care much about the linguistic rights of the others. So even if it's bad, we are not in a position to claim that English is threatening cultural diversity, because this is exactly what we did for centuries. And now that we cannot do it anymore, because nobody speaks French anymore, we would complain. I mean, that wouldn't be very polite. French influence is fading away. Well, it's our fault. We should have fought harder. We should have been realist. As in, fighting to protect our linguistic interests. We didn't. We are losing the battle. Who cares? Especially not me, as I can speak English. I'm joking here. I don't want you to turn cynical. But, there is something like that. And French professors, especially in law faculty, they tend to say all the time that students were better before, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I can tell you that you are far better than students 10 years ago. Your English is far better. And of course, this shouldn't be, you shouldn't feel threatened by this evolution. But, work on the language. Keep on with that. And anyway, even you think it's really bad, although it's not worse than the 20th century, you have to live in the real world. And if you believe what I've just said, maybe you don't believe that. Maybe you didn't understand, or maybe you didn't listen. But if you believe that, and if you're unhappy with English linguistic hegemony, you should try to change it. But do not pretend it does not exist. And if you want to change it, well, you definitely need to speak English. Because only by publishing in English-speaking media about the impoverishment of global culture, you will have a chance to modify the trend we're on. Yes?
Well, I have one more question. So in France exists l'Académie française in order to, preserve the French language. So do you think it'd be a good idea if every country had such an academy in order to support multilingualism? Do you think that'd be a way to...
That would be excellent. But, well, if you knew a little bit about the Académie Française, maybe you would be disappointed. They're all very old, senile male. Yeah. No, you're right. No, as a concept, we should, of course, promote the cultural diversity and help developing country to preserve their cultural values and their languages. What is fascinating is that the number of languages is dwindling. There are less and less languages, spoken languages on Earth. So that would be a nice thing to do. I agree with you. That would be nice. But then we've got a limited amount of energy, and doing that would require to cut on other budget. Like we should buy less weapons to put money in this kind of program. But who wants to buy less weapons? Well, I do, but we are just living in a crazy world. There are all these brilliant things to do, but the money is going somewhere else. And okay, I'm not sure it's a very good answer I gave you. It's a bit cynical, but you're right. What is interesting is that in the French case, we have a very high idea of our culture, but at some point we lost we lost part of our power, and it's instead of trying to maintain this power, we just closed all the windows, and we decided that instead of trying to export our cultural values, we would just reject the values of the others. That would be easier. We don't have to travel to export our language. We'll just decide that the other people's languages we will not speak. It's not a good solution, but this is what has happened until recently. I don't know if it makes sense. I don't know if you feel the same, and probably things are changing at the moment, but there is a bit of that. Okay. Um, it's time for a break unless you have questions. No. Thank you very much. It's very nice to have students who interact. There should be more of you like that. Hello.
Do you prefer to speak in English?
Yes.
Yeah.
The rule.
Yeah. I was wondering, you talked about presentations and stuff
Yes.
like that, and I'm not sure to do one, but I was wondering if like, there's a subject that is like very important for me. It's like Palestine, and I don't know
Excellent.
if it can be not like too political here.
No, there is nothing too political here.
Okay.
So that would be 10 minutes at the most.
Yeah.
Bring some background. You
Yeah,
can
I-
come.
I
You can
have
come up
friends
with. You can
that
come up with your ideas.
They're living there, so they send me
Yeah.
pictures,
Yeah.
ideas. Like
And-
I'm not
no.
gonna
So
show.
what I'm saying is
stuff.
that you are very welcome to come with your ideas, but it is a sensitive subject. So the first part of the presentation has to be like
Historical.
neutral,
Facts.
and then try to separate
Yeah.
the fact and the political assessment.
Yeah.
Both are welcome, but you need to make sure that people understand.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
To mine, I think that non-native English speakers are at an advantage because of linguistic relativity. They have different perspective on the language and what is said, and that brings value to
Yeah.
their ideas and their way of thinking. And because of that, hegemony can be a good thing for the countries that are submitted to it.
No, that's excellent. Yeah, you're right. But the
Because-
thing is,
yeah.
I mean, Donald Trump is a good example. Donald Trump is stupid, okay?
I
But
don't think so.
well, I mean, yeah, maybe he's
Seems stupid.
maybe he's clever, but he's not. He doesn't speak two languages, so linguistic relativity is something he will never experience. He only has one perspective on the world, and it doesn't make him less dangerous, And so I see your point. Not being a native and having to learn the language will make you a better person than the people who are natives.
But even in debates or when you're having international debates or conventions, it gives a bit of an advantage to those who have learned English and speak other languages.
If you speak it very well,
Yeah,
maybe, but communication has to do with transmission of knowledge, but it also has to do with rhetoric. It's like a fight,
and that's why it's a clear disadvantage because you don't master the vocabulary, you can't think of your sentences as well, and you can't phrase your ideas as well as a native speaker. So in that way, you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
But when thinking about the ideas themselves, it's an advantage. When you're a scientist, if you study sociology or psychology, linguistic relativity can be a powerful tool.
Yeah, you're right. I totally agree with you. Yeah. Except that I tend to have an agonistic vision of the world. I see the world as a result of